We're starting today the Mishnah on Daf Yutes Amud Aleph. Sagt the Mishnah, Ma'ois shenimtzu bein Shkalim. Money that's found on the ground between the Shkalim. As we learned before, there are 13 different boxes that they place different coins for different purposes into it. So if you found money between the box of the Shkalim, Linedava, and the box of where the Nedav is, the Gemara is going to explain how that's exactly possible, because it would seem that the Nedava was on the completely different side. But if it was found together in between these two, so then where do we put the money? Where does it belong to? Karev l'shkalim. If the money is found closer to the box of the shkalim, yiplu l'shkalim. So you put it into the box of the shkalim. L'nedava. If it's found closer to the box of the nedava, so yiplu l'nedava. So you put it into the nedava. Mechze l'mechze. If it's right in between, not closer to one or the other, then yiplu l'nedava. So what you do is you put it into the nedava, which the Gemara will explain why to the nedava and not to the shkalim. Similar halachas here, the Mishnah goes through different scenarios. Ben eitzim l'levaina, if the money is found between the box of the eitzim and the box of levaina, karav l'eitzim, closer to the box of the wood, yiplu l'eitzim. L'levaina, yiplu l'levaina. Mechza l'mechza, if it's right in between, yiplu l'levaina. Then you put it into the levaina, and here it's simple to understand why. Because eitzim is not as important or as high as a carbon as levaina is. Eitzim, the wood is only used to burn the karbanis. It's a hechsher for the carbon. The levaina itself is actually a carbon that's burnt in the mizbeach. So if you have a doubt, you're more machmer, and you put it at the levaina.
How do we translate levaina?
Frankincense.
Oh yeah, frankincense.
Ben kinin legais le'ayla. If it's found between the kinin, the box of the kinin, which is according to the Chachamim in the previous Mishnah, is a box that's used for both chatos and ayla. Legais le'ayla, and the other box which is gais le'ayla, which is only used for the birds that are brought for an ayla. So if it's karav lekinin, you pull the kinin, you throw it for the kinin. Karav legais le'ayla, you pull legais le'ayla. Mechza le'mechza, if it's half and half, you pull legais le'ayla, because an ayla is fully burnt on the mizbeach, more than a chatas, which is partially eaten, so therefore you throw it into the ayla, which is on a higher level. Ben chulin la'maisa. So this is not on the base of mikdash, this is b'chlal, money that's found between chulin and maisa, or maisa sheni that is, money of maisa sheni. Karev l'chulin, if it's closer to the chulin, yiplu l'chulin, so put it where the chulin is. L'maisa sheni, if it's found closer to the maisa sheni, yiplu l'maisa sheni. Mechza l'mechza, yiplu l'maisa sheni, you have to be machmer and throw it into the maisa sheni. So zeh ha'klal, here's the rule. If it's found closer to one, so then you put it into that one, even if it's one that's more lenient. But if it's half and half, right in the middle, so then you throw it into the one that's more machmer, more stringent. Zog the Gemara, first case in the Mishnah. What did it say? Where was the coins found? Between the Shkalim and a Dava. So the Gemara asks, it only should have said that the coins were found between the Shkalim and the Kinim. Because if you look in the previous Mishnah, in the end of the previous Perek, they were, if the boxes, the 13 boxes were on a straight row, so you had the boxes of the new Shkalim, of the old Shkalim, and right after that were the Kinim. So if it was found between the boxes of the Shkalim and the Kinim, they're near each other. How can we say it was found between the boxes of the Shkalim and the Nedava, which is all the way at the end? So the Gemara explains that Rab Abum B'Shem Rab Pincha says, Kimim Buchlier Hayu Eisen. The 13 boxes were not in a straight row, it was basically in a circle. Buchlier is some kind of a chain, some kind of a necklace in a circle, so therefore these boxes were all in a circle. So the Nedavis, the 6 boxes of the Nedava that are at the end, comes around in a circle and it's right near the box of Shkalim. So that's where it was found. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Hayu eisen mechze lemechze. So sorry, it goes together. Kimim buchlier hayu eisen. It was made like a circle. Okay. Now the Gemara goes to the next halacha of what it said in the Mishnah. Mechze lemechze. So the Mishnah says the halacha is if it's found between the shkalim and the dava, what do? Yiplu l'nedava. So it should go into the nedava. So according to some girsas, the Gemara here asks a question. It only should have said that if it's half of and half, it should go to the shkalim. Why should it go to nedava? It would seem that in some sense at least, shkalim is more stringent. Shkalim is a chiyuv, karbanis tzibur, that you're obligated to bring. The nedavis are just donations that you're not obligated. So as we said, anytime there's a doubt, it should go into what's more l'chumra. So why, if it's in between, doesn't it go into the shkalim? So the Gemara brings 2 pshatim. Is the boy meimar? There are those that want to say and say the pshat is as follows. Shema yiplu l'shiyarei alishka. If you're going to throw what's in between into shkalim, even if it's true that if those shkalim end up using for the karbanis tzibur, that's going to be more machmer, but when they poured out the shkalim from that box, there was always leftovers. They didn't pour out the whole thing. If it ends up in the shirayim, in the leftovers, what do you do with the leftovers? We learned earlier in the Masechta, the leftovers are used for the buildings and the walls, the Yerushalayim and different places. So you're basically taking this money down a level for being used to bring a carbon. If it would have gone into the Nedava, it would have been brought as a carbon. If it goes to the Shiyarei Alishka, it goes down a level. So therefore we have to throw it into the Nedava, so we know for sure it's going to be brought as a carbon on the Mizbeach. Is the boy meimar? Others answer as follows. Mechza le-mechza, if it's found right in between the Machzas HaShekel and the Nedavis, kimisha meis. It's as if the owner that donated this Machzas HaShekel passed away. We don't know who this owner is, and now it's found just on the ground. You're picking up something from the ground which is ownerless. So it's as if you have Machzas HaShekel that was dedicated and the owner died. Now what's the halacha when a person dedicates Machzas HaShekel and before he gives it into the box he dies? Amar Rabbi Yosef, Adanon Tamon. So Rabbi Yosef said, we had this before once. So when he said, when I was still in Bavel, Shamis called Rav Yehuda, Shal Shmuel. I heard Rav Yehuda asking Shmuel the question, Hifrish Shikloi V'meis. You designated your Machzas HaShekel, and before you brought it, you died. So what do you do with it? Amalei, he told him, Yiplu l'nedava. So you can't give it for the Machzas HaShekel anymore because the owner died, but he already designated it for a carbon, for the Machzas HaShekel. So it goes into the Nedavis, into the backs of Nedavis. So that's the pshat here as well. This that's found on the ground right in between, and you're not sure which one it belongs to. It's like the owner designated it, and he died. We don't know who the owner is, so it goes into the Nedavis. The Gemara brings another halacha that Rabbi Yosef also said that he heard from Rav Yehuda, although it's not really directly connected. Asiris ha'efa shaloi, or some are going, it's Meiser asiris ha'efa shaloi, the leftovers of the carbon that a Kohen Gadol would bring every day. It's an asiris ha'efa, it's a carbon mincha. What do you do with the leftovers of the money for this carbon? Rabbi Yechanan Amar Yelichem liyam ha'melach. The leftovers of this money can't be used for anything. You just have to throw it away in the Yam HaMelach. Rabbi Lazar yiplu l'nedava. The leftovers of this will go to the Nedavis and be brought as karbanis on the Mizbeach. Now the Gemara goes to the next section, one of the next things that it says in the Mishnah, that if you have the money that was between the kinim and the Geizlei Oyla, what do you do with the money? It goes into the Geizlei Oyla. Now the kinim is a box which is used to bring a chatos and a Oyla. For a woman that's a zava or a yeldis, you have to bring a chatos and an Oyla. Right, so then you're taking money that might have belonged to that box with this chatos and Oyla, and you're throwing it into the box, which is totally Oyla, because that's more machmer, because it's going to be totally burnt in the Mizbeach. But the question of the Gemara now is, v'kashya, on this is a question, v'yesh chatos kreva Oyla, do we ever find such a thing, that something that's designated for a carbon chatos should then end up becoming an Oyla? A chatos can't end up being an Oyla. Well, a chatos is a chatos, so how do we throw it into the box of the Oyla? So the Gemara answers, yes, in this case you could. Chizkiya b'shem Reb Shimon ben Lakish says, Tnai bezdanu, this is a condition of the bezdin, not only here in this case where you have the money that was found on the floor, but b'chlal, there's a Tnai bezdin, a condition of the bezdin, ala maisreis sheyikrivu Oyla, that the leftovers of money that was designated for a chatas, that it could be used for an Oyla. So the same thing over here, the leftover, and it's not leftovers, it's money that's found on the ground and you don't know where it belongs to, so it can be brought as an Oyla. But the Gemara says, wait, but there's still a problem. There's somebody that donated this money for her carbon chatas and Oyla. So her carbon chatas is never being brought. Ha'isha hazais, this woman, bameh himis kaperes. How is she having her kapara? Right, she has to bring this carbon in order to have her full kapara to be able to eat kachim. We had in the Gemara we learned yesterday, a woman donates her money, and then she can be sure that her carbon was brought and she can go and eat kachim. But here her money got lost on the ground and she doesn't know if her carbon chatas was brought. It's going to actually be brought as an Oyla. So b'mehi miskaperes. Rav Yitzchak says there's another thing over here. Tnai bezdin hu. There's another condition with the kainim that the bezdin has. Hamesapik esakinin. The one that is providing the money. In other words, that kain that takes care of taking out this money to bring it to be used for the karbanis, who misapik esapsulos. He is also the one that's responsible that, let's say he had money that he brought he bought a carbon chatas with it, and the carbon chatas ended up being puzzle. Who's going to be responsible to make sure that there's a replacement to bring another carbon chatos? This kain. There's a t'nai bezin that if you're working in the Beis HaMikdash, if there's a carbon that's pasul, the owner can't be responsible for it. They have no idea. They're not staying there to wait to see what happens. So the kain is responsible for this pasul carbon. So just like this kain is responsible for a carbon that becomes pasul, the same thing is also if this kain loses the money and he doesn't end up having that money to bring the carbon chatos, he has to donate money and donate it for the owner, for this woman, and bring it for her sake.
From his own pocket?
Yeah, from his own pocket. He has to bring, if he lost it, or if it became puzzle, he has to bring them, that's a t'nai bezin. If you're doing that Veda and you lose or there's something becomes puzzle, you have to provide it for the owner, and that's how you have the kapara for this woman. The next thing in the Mishnah, it said that there's the Mishnah brought over here a few different cases, right, between the Ketores, not Ketores, sorry, there was no Ketores in our Mishnah. The Mishnah brought another few cases. The Gemara here is going to point out that the Mishnah did not use all the different scenarios that are possible. We didn't go through all the different things, the 13 different boxes here. So the Gemara says, Lo tzarcha dala ben Ketores leitzim. It didn't say what happens if you found it between the Ketores and the eitzim. Really, the word Ketores, most Mefarshim are not Geiris Ketores, because there was no box for Ketores. But what was the box that was right near the Ketores? You had in the previous, not the Ketores, the box that was right near the Eitzim is the Levaina, right? So, or between the Eitzim, what was after the Eitzim? Between the Eitzim and the Geizlei Eila, right? So instead of being Geiris over here, the word Ketores, you put in instead, the Mishnah does not mention, what do you do if there's Geizlei Eila and Eitzim, and in between you found the money? Now what happens if you find the money between the backs of the Levaina and the backs of the Zahav that's for the Kapairis? The Mishnah didn't mention that scenario either. So the Gemara explains the reason is the Mishnah doesn't have to go through every single one of the boxes because V'tanisa b'saifa. The Mishnah tells us already in the end, Zeh haklal hoilchen acha hakarev, that you always go after what's closer to, even if it's the kula, and if it's mechze mechze, if it's right in between, lahachmer. You always throw it into the one that's more chumra. So it says the klal, so it doesn't have to go through every single case individually. Next Mishnah, it goes through over here other halachas of money that are found b'chlal in Yerushalayim or in the Harabayis, as we'll see. Zok the Mishnah, mois shenimtzu lefnei seichre behema, money that's found in front of the merchants that are selling the animals in Yerushalayim. L'olam meiser. That money is always meiser. The reason is because what did the people in Yerushalayim do with the money? All the people that were oile regel bought their meiser sheni money. What do they do with the meiser sheni money? You're supposed to buy karbanis for shlamim with this. You can really buy any food with it, but there's a takana that you're supposed to buy karbanis shlamim with this. And then most of the carbon shlamim, a lot of the carbon shlamim, the owner can eat. And even now they had a lot of money of meiser sheni. So even if they couldn't use up all their money on themselves while they were there by the Beis HaMikdash, so they would give the money, or they would exchange the money with the people from Yerushalayim. So all the people of Yerushalayim, very often, they had money, most of the times, they had money from Ma'aser Sheni that they were using to buy from the people, from the merchants that were selling animals. So if you find the money, Lefnei Seichre Beheme, it's safe to assume that this is money from Ma'aser Sheni. The Amos says, there's a machlekes about this. According to some opinions, it's really a suffix. It's still a suffix. And the reason is because it depends out of whose pocket this money fell. If it fell out of the seller's pocket, the animal merchant, so he already got the money. Once he got the money, that money is not Ma'aser Sheni money anymore, because it was already paid to him for the animals. The animals are now bought with this Ma'aser Sheni money, so it's chulin. If it fell out of the buyer's pocket, so then it's still Ma'aser Sheni money, so it's sort of a suffix. So some say that when it says there in the Mishnah that it's Meiser, it means a suffix. But others, Taisva says, no, it's not necessarily a suffix because you go on the chazakah of what the money was before. The money before is Ma'aser Sheni. And also, there are much more buyers than there is sellers. There's a few sellers and there's a lot of buyers that are coming to buy, so it's much more likely that the money would fall out of the pocket from the person that was buying. So therefore we say it's in Yerushalayim, by Seichre Behema, it's Ma'aser Sheni. Ubahara bayis, if you find money in the hara bayis, then chulin. Then I say that the money is chulin. And it doesn't matter when it is that you find it in the hara bayis. And the reason is because most of the year on the hara bayis, any money that a person would have there would be chulin. Even if it's true that during the time when you're oile regel, so the people have Ma'aser Sheni money with them, but during the year, most of the year, Roiv of the year, the money there is Chulin. But in Yerushalayim, but if you find money in Yerushalayim, so there's a difference. B'shar kol yomais hashana, if you find money in Yerushalayim any day of the year, Chulin. So then that's Chulin money. Or b'shas haregel, but if you find the money during the time when everyone is oile regel, then I call Maisa. Whatever you find is Maisa because you have all the guests that are there in Yerushalayim and they bring a lot of Maisa Sheni money with them. So then it's going to be Maisa Sheni. Now, what's the explanation here? What's the difference between money found in the Harabayis that we say that no matter what, it's always Chulin, and the money that's found in in Yerushalayim, it depends if it's any time of the year or it's a time when people are oile regel. So the explanation is, this is explained in the Bavli, in Masechta Pesachim we learned it, and Rashi it explains it over there, that the Harabayis is a place that was never swept. Harabayis is on a slope and there's a wind there, they never swept it. So therefore, whatever money was lost over there, so it could have been lost much before, not just now when you were oile regel. It's money that's sitting, it could be sitting there from a long time. So therefore, any money that's found there, you have to take into account what's the roiv of money that could have been lost there the entire year. And therefore I say, roiv of the money that a person could be carrying in a Harabayis is Chulin. Yerushalayim though was swept every day. They would sweep it every day, and therefore, if it's during the time when you're oile regel, then I say it's Ma'aser Sheni money. But any other time of the year, I say that whatever was there from before and the time of Aliyah Regel, it was swept up. So therefore, then I say that it's Chulin. So that's why over here there's a distinction. Basar shenimtze bazara. If you have the meat from the karbanis that are found in the azara, and you don't know what carbon it's from, what is it? Vadim, if it's larger pieces of the limbs of the animal, then oilos. Then I say if it's cut as larger limbs, then it's probably a carbon oila that's supposed to be sacrificed in the mizbeach. If it's left in such big sizes, it wasn't cut up to be eaten. It was probably just cut up to be brought on the mizbeach. Vechatichos, if it's cut in smaller pieces, then I say chatois. Then it's probably for a carbon chatos, which is usually eaten. Even though there are many other carbonis that are eaten, but a carbon chatos is kachik kachim, which is eaten inside the azara. So then I say it's a carbon chatos, which is eaten in the azara. Or Yerushalayim, if you find meat in Yerushalayim. So then I say zivchei shlamim. This meat is probably from a carbon shlamim that, because you could eat, the carbon shlamim is kachim kalim, you could eat it in the whole Yerushalayim. Now the thing is, all these pieces that it says here that you find, it doesn't mean that you could actually burn it on the mizbeach. It doesn't mean that you could actually eat it. All of these cases, to ubar tzu'urasai, you're going to have to wait overnight until it spoils. And then v'yetzil beis hasreifa, you have to take it out in the place where all the pasal kachim are burnt, and you have to burn it because you're not exactly sure what's the story with it. Maybe when you found it, it was already left overnight. Maybe it was already noisar. Could be it's what you found is already puzzle, so you can't eat it. So therefore you have to take it out to be burnt. Nimtza begvulen, if you find meat outside, we're talking now about outside Yerushalayim. B'chlal, you find a piece of meat. Vadim, if it's cut in larger pieces, then I say nevelos. It's probably not kosher meat because it's not kosher to eat. So therefore it wasn't cut into small slices and smaller pieces to sell or to eat. It was left in large pieces to sell to a guy. Chatichos, if it was cut into smaller pieces, then I say mutares. Then it's mutar. Then it's meat that's probably kosher meat. Or b'shas haregel shabasa merube. If you find in Yerushalayim during the time of Yom Tov when there's such an influx, there's so much meat that they are being eaten from all the karbanis, so then I say afei vadim, even if it's cut in larger pieces, mutares. It's mutar to eat. It's probably kosher to meat because it's so much meat, so it's not necessarily cut into small sizes. Sagt the Gemara, Leitzarcha, the law, shouldn't it be necessary for the Mishnah to say differently? That Bahara Bayis, Kodesh, that the money that's found in the Harabayis, that should belong maybe to Kodesh. Maybe that belongs to, we said that there are 13 boxes of monies that were donated for 13 different things that are Kodesh in the Beis HaMikdash. So why did it say that if you find money on the Harabayis, I assume that it's Chulin? Because most of the year, people that are carrying money there would be chulin. Maybe you should say that it belongs to the money of the Beis HaMikdash, that it should be kodesh. So Rabbi explained, Rabbi, and in the name of Rab Chiya, b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, said as follows: Chazakeh. There's a chazakah. There's an assumption. She'ein hakayin meitzim in alishka mois. The kayin does not take out the money from the boxes. Achu machalon ala behemeh. When the kayin takes out the money from the boxes, a machzas hashekel or whatever boxes it may be, he gives it right away and he exchanges it immediately for the animal that's going to be brought for the carbon. So immediately the money is becoming chulin. He doesn't carry it around with him, and then right away he's machal it on an animal, takes from the box, and right away is machal it on an animal. So the money becomes right away chulin. So even the money that came from the machzas hashekel or nadavis or whatever it was, it's chulin already. Basar shenimtza, meat that's found. So what did it say in the Mishnah? That it can't. All of these, there's different things. There was a case that you say that it's a chatas or a oila, but in all of these cases, you can't actually eat it. You can't actually bring it as a carbon. You have to leave it to spoil and then burn it. So the Gemara says, Rab Loza b'shem Rab Hoshia said, Hisiya das, b'negeh to all kachim. If a person did not pay attention to it, he left it alone, you will masiach das from it. Ta'on ibutzura, it becomes puzzle, and you have to wait until the next day, and then you burn it. Now, what's the chiddush over here of what Rabbi Loza is saying? We had this in the sugya, in the Gemara, in Psachim. There's a psul of hesach hadas by kachim. Kachim cannot be left alone. You have to always have it in your proximity, you have to pay attention to it. Right? But now the question is, when it becomes puzzle, do you burn it right away? Because it's puzzle, kachim, it's puzzle, so you can just go ahead and burn it right away. Or no, you have to wait until overnight and then you burn it. So the Gemara over there brings that, I think it was Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish says that you go ahead and burn it right away. It's puzzle. And it's considered to be a psul haguf. You will masich das from it. That itself is a psul and you burn it right away. Rabbi Yechanan says, no. The only reason when you're masiach das from kachim it's possible is because maybe it became tamei, maybe something happened to it. So yeah, it's not really 100% possible. So you have to wait until it's the next day and it becomes nicer or becomes spoiled, and then you burn it. So that's what Rabbi Hoshia is saying. Rabbi Hoshia is saying you have to wait until the next day and then you burn it. And Amar Rabbi Hoshia, Masnisan Amra, our Mishnah is saying this halacha. We can see it here from our Mishnah because it says. This is what our Mishnah says. To ubar tzeurasai v'yetze lebeis hasreifa, that these pieces of meat that are found, and you were masich das from it, it got lost, you don't know what it's from. So what do? You have to burn it. So what does it say in our Mishnah? You don't burn it right away. You have to wait until the next day to burn it. So I see here clearly in our Mishnah that you wait until the next day. Rav Yaisi, and Rav Yaisi says v'yaos, and this is well said. This is true because la'achle enat yachol. When you find this meat, even if it's small pieces, and you know that it was from a carbon chatos, you can't eat it because you don't know what happened to it. Shemon eskalkol tzurasei. Maybe it's already spoiled. Maybe it was already left overnight. Maybe it's nicer. And to burn it right away, you can't either, because maybe it's still kosher, maybe it's still fit to eat. You're not supposed to burn it. So lefum kain, therefore, tzarech meime, what we say is, to uba tzurasa, you have to wait until the next day, and then v'yetze lebeis hasreifa, and then you go ahead and you burn it. The next thing I said in the Mishnah was, nimtza begvulin, if you find meat anywhere, not inside the Mishalayim or the Beis HaMikdash, outside, anywhere. So what did it say? It depends. If you find large limbs, so then it's probably treif, that's it's being sold to a guy. If you find smaller pieces, it's kosher and you can eat it. So Rab Krispa, B'Shem, Rab Yesi, Rab Chanina said, Eivarim nevelas. If you find large pieces, we know for sure that it's an avela. And like an alein, we're so sure that it's an avela that if you eat from it, you get malchus, mishum nevela, for eating from an avela. And he says, you can see this from the Mishnah, masnita amra kain. Our Mishnah is telling this to us. Because what does it say in the Mishnah? Evare nevelis. If it's large pieces, we assume that it's an avela. Chatichais, if it's small pieces, mutarais. Then I say that it's allowed to eat. Now when it says chatichais mutarais, that the small pieces you're allowed to eat, Loi mamish, doesn't it literally mean that you're allowed to go and eat it? You could totally rely on the fact that it's kosher. So just like when it says that the smaller pieces, you can rely on the fact that it's kosher 100%, so similar, when it says that the bigger limbs that are nevelos, you could also be certain that it's a nevela. Like an aleim mishum nevela. You get malchus, you're 100% sure that this is a nevela and you get malchus on it.
Why a big piece is not kosher?
So I guess when the butchers would cut up the parts of the animals, if they're selling it to another yid, it's like the way they sell meat today. You don't sell an entire limb, an entire part. You get a massive piece. You sell it in small pieces, like a piece of a shoulder. So they sell it in little sections. That's the chaticha. So then you know that the butcher cut it up to sell for another yid. But if you're selling it off to a guy, so you're not going to prepare it for him to eat. So you sell these massive limbs. It's an avela. Rab Krispa b'shem Rab Yosef Rab Chanina said, Im haya machreizes, if you have these meats that were placed on a chain. They would connect them on some kind of a chain. Then mutaris. Then it's allowed because it wasn't prepared that way when it was sold to a guy. Butchers prepared it that way when they sold it to Yidden. So then you know for sure that it's kosher meat. In connection to this whole halacha about finding meat, the Gemara brings here other examples for this. And this is a famous Gemara. We had it also in Psachim, beneged to the case where you have the stores, kosher stores and non-kosher stores, and you're not sure where the meat came from. Zok the Gemara, Teisha chanuyos meichris basan avela. If you have 9 stores that are selling non-kosher meat, va'achas mecheres basa shchuta, and 1 store sells kosher meat, and you walked into a store, you were inside one of these stores and you bought the meat, and it's schalfulay. You don't remember which store you bought the meat from. Chayshish. So then you can't eat from this meat. Even though the case over here was you have so in this case you have 9 stores that are selling from Nevela. And 1 store which is selling basa shchuta. So it's very possible you went to the Nevela store. So you have to be concerned if you walked into the store. I mean, this is really based on the concept, the way it's described in the Bavli. Kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. If you actually walked into the store, which is an established place, so over there, even though there's 9 versus 1, but it's as if it's half and half, and you can't eat this. V'lenimtzes, however, if you find meat out on the street, what's going to be the halacha? Hoilchen acha harayv. Here, you're going to follow the rayv. That's the halacha. When you find something, it's parush. It was separated from the source of where it came from, and you found it on the street. So then you're not sure where it came from, you go after the rayv. So in this case where it was mostly nevela, you go after the rayv and you can give this person malchus. And if you walked into the store, so then you're not going to be able to give this person malchus because it's like half and half. You're not 100% sure. The same halacha will be if it's going to be in the opposite kind of a case. You have 9 stores that are selling kosher meat. And only 1 store sells trefa meat. And now you're not sure which store you walked into. Even though 9 stores are selling kosher meat. But because you walked into a store, it's kavua, and here we consider it to be like half and half, and you can't eat this meat. But if you found it outside the store, you never walked into any store, you just found it, and we're not sure where it came from, then we follow rayv. So this is the famous halacha, the difference between parush and kavua, when you follow rayv and not. Another halacha, you have meat that's found in the hands of a guy, and you're not sure where it came from. So Rabbi Yechanan said, it's going to have the same halacha like meat that you found out in the street. What did we just say? If it's found out in the street, you follow rayv. You have to look what most stores are. So Rabbi Yechanan said, if it's found in the hands of a guy, it has the same halacha. You have to look at what most of the stores are. So the Gemara now asks a question of this, and it brings a story that happened. Rabbi Lazar be Rab Chagai avem masmech l'Rab Mona. They were walking, and he was lending support to Rab Mona. So what did they see? Chama l'chadar moi. So Rab Mona saw a guy that mekateya min susei, he's cutting pieces of meat from his horse meat, umapik lebra, and he's taking it out to sell. So he's selling horse meat, this guy. So Amalei, so Rab Mona says to Rabbi Lazar, Hadahi the Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Isn't this the exact kind of scenario that Rabbi Yechanan spoke about? And what did Rabbi Yechanan say? Animtza biyad nachri, meat that's found in the hands of a guy, kenimtza beplatya, it's like it's found in the street. And Rabbi Yechanan said that if it's found in the hands of a guy, you should treat it the same like any meat that's found in the street, and you should go after the rayv of the stores in that city. If rayv of the stores are kosher stores, you can eat it. But he was pointing out to him this incident that they saw in front of their own eyes. Here's a guy, and he's selling horse meat. So how can you say that if it's found in the hands of a guy, you should follow most of the stores, like if it's found stam out in the street? Isn't there much more of a likelihood that a guy might be just selling horse meat? So how could you use any meat that's in the possession of a guy? That was his question on Rabbi Yechanan's psak. So Amalei, so he answered him, Kain Amar Rabbi Yosi Rebbe. This is what Rabbi Yosi, my teacher, Rabbi Lazar is saying, this is what Rabbi Yosi, my teacher, said to me, that Rabbi Yechanan did not say that in any case that you find meat in the hands of a guy, that you can use it, as long as if there's more kosher stores that you can use it. No, he only said that V'hein shero oisa yaitze mimakulin shel Yisrael. If on that day they saw this guy coming out of a Yiddish butcher. So then, even though they don't know if this meat that he has now, and hours later in the day, the meat that he's selling now, they don't know if it came from that store. But if most of the stores are Yiddish stores, and they saw this guy coming out of a Yiddish store, then I could rely on buying from a guy. But stam meat that a guy is selling, so like the incident that the Gemara just brought, it's possible that he's selling horse meat. You can't buy from a guy. Sagt the Gemara weiter, another scenario that happened. Chad banash b'tzipayrin. There was a person in the city of Tzipayri. Azul, he went, boy mizbun kupad min tapcha. He wanted to buy a piece of meat from the butcher. This butcher was in a fight with this person and he didn't give him this piece of meat. Amalei l'chad roimiyeh. So he sent a shliach. He sent a guy as a shliach. And v'aisilei. And this guy went and picked up the meat from the butcher for him and he brought him meat. So now this guy comes back to the butcher. This Yid comes back to the butcher and says, no, I outsmarted you. Amalei nasvis al karche. Didn't I get the meat from you against your will? I sent the guy and you gave the meat to the guy and the guy brought me the meat. Amalei, so he says to him, you outsmarted me, but Valav busted the nevela, obviously. If it was a guy, the guy was picking up the meat. I gave him non-kosher meat. I gave him busted nevela. Yeah, so basically he's saying you got nevela meat. You didn't get anything that you could eat from me. But now the question is, if he's saying that he gave nevela meat for this guy, should we now be concerned, bichlal, about all the meat in the place over here, that the whole kashrus, he says he gave nevela meat? Rabbi Yirmiyah b'shem Rab Chanina said that Maise bal lefnei Rabbi. This story came in front of Rabbi, and v'amar he said, Loi kula mine meisa makulin detzipayrin. Just because this guy comes and tells us that he gave nevela meat for this guy, that he's not going to be believed now to make the stores, all the butchers in Tzipayrin to be treif, because he's saying that there's nevela meat here. No, if he says there was nevela meat, fine, that's that particular incident. But all the other meat in the store and the stores in Tzipayrin are still going to remain kosher meat.